Opposition leader Tony Abbott has reportedly been caught on camera making an insensitive remark about the death of one of our soldiers. The comments were allegedly made during a recent visit to Afghanistan.
A firefight in Afghanistan last August. Australian troops attacked by 100 insurgents. Realising someone is shot.
This guy's got a gunshot wound.
It was one of ours.
Yes. No, I think it's the same, man. Really? Who? I think it's the same.
28-year-old Australian Jared McKinney. 6 weeks later, opposition leader Tony Abbott visited Lance Corporal McKinney's mates on the front line, firing rifles and machine guns as Corporal McKinney's death hung heavily over his comrades. A leaked email from one claimed they hadn't had enough firepower support. He said it was a miracle another 5 or 6 weren't killed.
It was a tragic day. It was not executed perfectly.
Colonel Jim Crichton, the US commander of Australia's troops in Uruzgan province, defended the operation but admitted mistakes.
It was a tragic, absolutely. But we all live and learn. But all the stuff that you see here and more was available.
And this was Tony Abbott's response. We showed Mr Abbott the vision today. This was his reaction.
Yeah, look, you've taken this out of context. You weren't there. I would never seek to make light of the death of an Australian soldier.
I'm not suggesting it, but he was explaining what happened on the day that Jared McKean was killed. Yeah. There was the email from the soldier suggesting there was not enough support, and Crichton was saying all the support you see here was there. Cantwell was saying he was upset that there'd been criticism of the operation on the day when McKinney was killed, and as a response to that reaction, you said what you said.
I was doing my best to support the soldiers that I was discussing with then. Look, a soldier has died, and you shouldn't be trying to turn this into a subsequent media circus.
The soldiers shouldn't? I shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I'm not turning into a media circus. I'm showing you vision of your reaction to his explanation about what happened on the day in the operation in which McKinney was killed. How's that turning into a media circus? Okay, well, tell me, what's the context, and if it's out of context, what is the context? You're not saying anything, Tony.
I've given you the response you deserve.
Mr Abbott's office tried to prevent the full footage of his Afghanistan visit from being released. 7 News only secured it after a 3-month Freedom of Information battle. Mr Abbott joined the Prime Minister at Jared McKinney's funeral. The soldier's widow, Becky, went into early labour. Son, Noah Jared, was born 3 hours later. In Parliament today, Mr Abbott acknowledged our latest casualty, Corporal Richard Atkinson.
Mourning the death of another brave soldier.
With more tact than this.
And joining me now from Canberra is Sky News political editor David Spears. David, just how damaging is this for Tony Abbott?
Well, Mike, it's certainly not helpful for the opposition leader. I think there's a couple of things we need to say. This footage is defence footage of Tony Abbott in Afghanistan that was held back at the time. You may remember last year an argument about whether the footage of Tony Abbott firing various weapons should have been made public. Well, now clearly it has been released to the Seven Network. We don't know the full context of the comment that Tony Abbott made, but we do know that it does seem to contradict the line the coalition was taking at the time, criticising the lack of adequate firepower and resource in that particular battle. For Tony Abbott to simply, say as he did there that shit happens, he is acknowledging that, yes, in some situations in Afghanistan, despite all the firepower, this can happen. Secondly, and more importantly here, I think the way he handled that confrontation there with Mark Riley is quite jarring. That silent fury from Tony Abbott, where he simply was nodding his head and wouldn't engage in an answer there really is quite extraordinary confrontation, quite an extraordinary exchange. And I think that might also remind some people that Tony Abbott perhaps, it could cause concern, I think, for some people that Tony Abbott does have a certain amount of rage, that he's not able to deal with that situation in a more amiable way to address the question and simply explain the context that he believes the comment was made in.
Yeah, fairly simmering below the surface, wasn't it? But earlier today, the opposition leader, David, really trying to keep the focus on the government's flood levy, putting forward alternative spending cuts. Are these cuts sensible?
Look, I think these cuts are, they're facing criticism already. I think it's important for Tony Abbott to have put cuts out there, to have simply opposed the flood levy without an alternative would not have gone down well, particularly with his backbench who do want to see him presenting more of an alternative, credible alternative to the government this year. So he had to do something. There's always losers when you talk about spending cuts, and whether it's the foreign aid budget, the money that he would like to take off the car industry, the Building the Education Revolution spending, or indeed the money for water buybacks, there'll be various sectional interests that are concerned about what he's thinking on these things. But at the end of the day, it's all hypothetical spending cuts. He's not in government. These cuts aren't going to happen. This is simply a bit of a look at what Tony Abbott would be doing if he gets into government, and who knows when and if that might happen.